Emily Dawson thought she had buried her past. But when Daniel Pierce came back into her life, their secret affair ignited a chain of lies, obsession, and murder that even the FBI couldn't untangle in time. Emily Dawson's life looked perfect from the outside. She lived in a tidy 2-story house on Maple Street with her husband Mark and their 2 young children. Her days followed a comforting routine, packing school lunches, walking the kids to the bus stop, and spending quiet afternoons designing logos for local businesses from her home office. Neighbors often waved to her as she tended to her flower garden, always smiling, always put together. To anyone looking in, Emily was the picture of suburban happiness, a woman who had everything she could ever want. But beneath that calm, well-mannered surface, a storm had been brewing for months, one that even Emily didn't fully understand until it was too late. It started innocently enough, with a message from an old high school classmate named Daniel Pierce. He had sent a simple, "Hey, remember me?" one evening on social media. Emily had smiled at the memory of the boy she once knew, the funny, carefree guy who used to make everyone laugh. They exchanged a few casual messages at first, talking about how much life had changed since graduation. Emily told him about her marriage, her kids, her small business. Daniel told her he had moved back to town recently after years of drifting between jobs and cities. He sounded lonely but kind, harmless. At first, their conversations felt like a pleasant distraction from the monotony of daily life. They talked about old memories, the prom they never went to together, the songs they used to love, the places they dreamed of visiting when they were young. For Emily, it was like opening a window into a forgotten part of herself, a version that existed before responsibilities and routines took over. She told herself it was just friendly nostalgia. But as weeks passed, their chats became more frequent, more personal, and far more dangerous. Daniel began to confide in her about his struggles, his job that didn't pay enough, his failed relationships, his sense of emptiness. Emily found herself trying to comfort him, offering kind words and support. In turn, Daniel began to flatter her, calling her beautiful, saying she deserved more than the ordinary life she had settled for. She knew she should ignore him, but every message felt like a spark she didn't want to extinguish. Before long, those late-night texts turned into long phone calls, and soon after they began to meet in person. Their first meeting happened on a rainy afternoon in a small coffee shop 2 towns over. Emily told Mark she was meeting a client. When she saw Daniel walk in, her heart pounded like it hadn't in years. He looked older but still had that boyish grin she remembered. They talked for hours, laughing like old friends. When they parted, he hugged her, and for a brief moment she didn't want to let go. That hug was the beginning of a secret that would soon consume both their lives. Over the next few months, the meetings became regular. They met in motels, back roads, and quiet corners of the city where no one knew them. Emily told herself she was in control, that she could stop any time. But she didn't. The thrill of it was intoxicating. The way Daniel looked at her like she was the only person in the world. The way she felt young again, wanted again. Still, with every secret meeting, guilt gnawed at her. She'd lie awake at night beside her sleeping husband, feeling the weight of her double life pressing down on her chest. Eventually, small cracks began to show. Mark noticed her becoming distant, distracted. She brushed it off as stress from work. But deep down, Emily knew her perfect facade was starting to crumble, and yet she couldn't stop seeing Daniel. What began as a harmless reconnection had become something she couldn't control, a dangerous attachment fueled by passion, lies, and the thrill of secrecy. She didn't realize it yet, but her world was about to collapse. The man she thought she could trust, the man who made her feel alive again, was about to drag her into a nightmare from which there would be no escape. And soon the quiet town of Brooksville would learn that even the most perfect lives can hide the darkest secrets. Daniel Pierce had always been a man who couldn't stay still for long. After high school, his life drifted from one job to another. Bartender, mechanic, delivery driver, never holding on to anything for more than a few months. He was charming, good-looking, and reckless, the kind of man who made promises he couldn't keep. When he reconnected with Emily Dawson, he saw a glimpse of something he hadn't felt in years: comfort, warmth, and a sense of belonging. At first, their connection made him feel alive again, but soon that spark turned into an obsession that began to consume him. Emily was everything Daniel wasn't. She was stable, responsible, and had built a life most people envied. The more time Daniel spent with her, the more he wanted what she had. But deep down he knew he could never fit into her world. He was the secret she hid behind a smile, the mistake she couldn't admit to anyone. That truth ate at him, turning affection into jealousy. When Emily began canceling their meetings or replying late to his messages, Daniel's frustration grew. He started calling her dozens of times a day, leaving voicemails filled with desperation and anger. Emily tried to pull away, but Daniel didn't take rejection well. He started showing up at places she went to, her favorite cafe, the parking lot near her gym, even outside her home. At first she thought it was a coincidence, but then she began receiving messages that made her blood run cold. One morning she found a note slipped under her windshield wiper. "I miss you. I see you every day." Another time she woke up to find a photograph taped to her front door, her and Mark at their children's school event smiling. Daniel had taken it without her knowing. That was when fear began to replace excitement. She wanted to confess everything to her husband, but guilt paralyzed her. Mark didn't deserve to know what she had done, and the shame of it felt unbearable. Instead, she told Daniel it was over, that they needed to stop before things got worse. But Daniel laughed. He told her she couldn't erase what they had. He said he loved her more than she loved herself, and if she left him, he would make sure everyone knew the truth. His words sent chills down her spine. She tried blocking his number, deleting her social media, and even changing her daily routines, but it didn't matter. He always found a way to reach her. Weeks passed in unbearable tension. Emily barely slept. Every sound outside made her heart race. She began checking the locks twice, keeping the curtains drawn and avoiding eye contact with neighbors who asked if she was all right. But the fear only grew stronger when she realized Daniel wasn't just threatening her peace. He was watching her every move. One night, as rain pounded on the windows, Emily heard a soft knock on the door. Her stomach twisted. Through the peephole she saw him, soaked, trembling, eyes wild. Daniel begged her to let him in, saying he just wanted to talk. She refused, telling him to leave before she called the police. But Daniel didn't move. His voice turned sharp, accusing her of using him, of destroying his life. When she tried to close the door, he forced his way inside. Panic surged through her. The room filled with shouting, footsteps, and the sound of something breaking. Emily didn't remember grabbing the heavy vase from the table, but when she did, everything happened in a blur. A flash of motion, a crack, and then silence. Daniel collapsed to the floor. Her heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe. She called his name, but there was no answer. The horror of what she had done sank in slowly, like poison spreading through her veins. Emily stood frozen for what felt like hours. Then instinct took over. She dragged his lifeless body to the basement, trembling uncontrollably, her mind blank. She couldn't call the police. She couldn't face her family. If anyone found out, her entire life would be over. As thunder rumbled outside, she made the decision that would seal her fate. She had to make Daniel disappear. When morning came, the rain had stopped, but the air felt heavy and still. Emily sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her blood-stained hands. Her husband was still away on a business trip, her children asleep upstairs. The house was silent except for the ticking of the clock. She knew what she had to do next. What she didn't know was that Daniel Pierce wasn't gone, not yet. And soon, the nightmare she thought she buried would rise again, darker and deadlier than ever. Detectives found the abandoned car on a foggy morning, half hidden where the hill sloped into a stand of pines. The driver's door hung open and the air inside smelled sharp and metallic. Blood had soaked into the upholstery and pooled on the floor. A shovel lay folded across the back seat as if it had been dropped in a hurry. In the trunk, wrapped in an old blanket, officers found a duffel bag and a single photograph of Emily standing on her porch. The image was folded, its edges wet with dew. Evidence techs moved through the scene with careful, practiced motions, photographing everything, collecting fibers and bagging items that might otherwise be overlooked. Forensics worked fast. Fingerprints matched Daniel Pierce. Trace amounts of a perfume commonly sold at local stores were found on a strip of tape inside the trunk. That perfume happened to be the same brand Emily used. Small hairs not yet tested for DNA clung to the blanket. The car told a messy story, one of struggle and haste, but it revealed nothing about who had been the last to touch the man inside. The case turned from a missing person to a possible homicide, and investigators widened their net. Surveillance footage from a gas station a few miles away proved the most damning. A grainy clip captured a sedan pulling in after midnight. The angle was poor and the light weak, but the woman behind the wheel wore the same long coat and carried the same tote Emily had been seen with around town. The timestamp showed the car there at 2:17 a.m., a time when Emily had told acquaintances she was at home. Detectives played the footage repeatedly, freezing frames, enhancing details until the outline of a familiar figure emerged. The image made the rounds in the station. Some officers frowned. Others rubbed their temples. It was the kind of lead that split a quiet town in two. Those who believed in Emily's innocence and those who did not. Neighbors who had once waved at Emily with casual warmth began to keep their distance. Conversations on front porches stopped as soon as she approached. Rumors mutated quickly. Some added details, others stripped them away until only the raw idea remained. A secret woman, a dead man, a family in pieces. Reporters from a nearby paper arrived, cameras briefly appearing at the end of driveways. The quiet of Maple Street cracked under the attention, and Emily's routine of school runs and gardening fell away beneath the glare. Interview notes showed Emily's answers stayed consistent at first, but tiny inconsistencies emerged under closer scrutiny. Times did not always line up. A receipt for a late-night coffee found in Daniel's car did not match the version of events she had given. A neighbor's Ring camera recorded a dark shape moving near the driveway, at a time Emily claimed she was asleep. Subtle mismatches like these are what detectives live for. They traced them until a pattern appeared. Detectives also turned over Daniel's devices. His phone, water damaged but recoverable, held messages and images that painted his state of mind in the weeks before his disappearance. Photos of Emily taken without her knowledge, notes scribbled on screenshots, and a list of places he had visited were all there. One entry stood out. A map pin dropped on a small, seldom-used boat launch not far from town. The pin had been placed at 11:03 p.m., on a night Emily could not clearly account for. As the pressure increased, Emily's behavior changed. She stopped attending community events, let calls go unanswered, and was seen twice carrying heavy trash bags to the curb in the dark. A private investigator hired by a worried relative began asking questions of local motel clerks and gas station attendants. Someone submitted an anonymous tip to the police about a late-night withdrawal from Emily's account. Bank records confirmed the withdrawal but couldn't say what the cash had been used for. Every piece of evidence looked small on its own, like a shard from a broken mirror. Together they reflected a fractured image that detectives could not ignore. The town watched as simple patterns of everyday life were transformed into a web of dates, receipts, camera clips, and worn fabric. With each new detail the case tightened. What had started as a disappearance now had the weight of proof pressing down from many directions, and Emily found herself standing at the center of a widening circle of suspicion. It was nearly 6 months after Daniel's disappearance when a group of hikers made the discovery that shattered the fragile calm of Brooksville. They had been following a trail near the riverbank when one of them noticed a section of disturbed soil. The earth looked recently turned, darker and uneven compared to the rest of the ground. At first they thought it might be an animal burial or discarded trash, but when they dug a little deeper out of curiosity, the edge of a plastic sheet appeared, and a faint, rotting odor filled the air. Within minutes, the hikers called the authorities, and by the afternoon, the area was swarming with police. The investigation that had gone cold suddenly came alive again. The forensics team worked late into the night. Under the layers of plastic and duct tape was a decomposed body, roughly matching Daniel's description. It didn't take long to confirm his identity through dental records and fingerprints. The discovery stunned the town, but it wasn't just the body that caught investigators' attention. It was the way it had been buried. The grave was shallow but meticulously arranged. The body was wrapped with care, the edges folded tightly and the surrounding ground cleared of most debris. Whoever had done it wasn't just hiding a crime. They were trying to erase it completely. The county police soon realized they were in over their heads. Evidence was limited, and the case was drawing national attention. When the FBI joined the investigation, things began to move quickly. Agents re-examined old evidence with fresh eyes, running advanced forensic tests and reconstructing timelines from digital data. Emily Dawson's name surfaced again and again in Daniel's phone records. Hundreds of deleted messages were recovered, painting a picture of a toxic and volatile relationship that had spiraled out of control. The tone of the final exchanges was dark. Threats, confessions, and a final message from Daniel that read, "If you don't come tonight, I'll make sure Mark knows everything." That message was sent only hours before Daniel vanished. FBI agents traced Emily's movements using her phone's location data. On the night Daniel disappeared, her phone was pinged near the very same riverbank where his body was found. When questioned, Emily claimed she had driven out there a few days later to clear her head. She said the location data must have overlapped. Her explanation sounded calm and logical, but the agents noticed the faint tremor in her hands and the way her eyes avoided theirs. As they dug deeper, more unsettling details emerged. Surveillance cameras from a marina near the river showed someone renting a small motorboat late that same night. The renter had signed with a false name, but the handwriting matched Emily's. The rental fee had been paid in cash, and records showed a withdrawal from her bank account for the exact same amount just hours earlier. It was enough to raise serious suspicion, but still not enough to arrest her. In the weeks that followed, the FBI placed Emily under discreet surveillance. They watched her every move, taking note of her growing paranoia. She rarely left the house except for groceries, often looking over her shoulder or checking her mirrors when driving. Agents observed her visiting the woods several times, parking her car by the roadside and walking toward the riverbank. Sometimes she stayed there for hours, standing still, staring at the water as if searching for something only she could see. The agents knew what this behavior meant. They were waiting for her to make one mistake, one sign of guilt they could prove beyond doubt. That opportunity came one evening when Emily returned home after another visit to the woods. When investigators quietly searched the spot she had stood on, they found fragments of plastic wrap and a rusted piece of duct tape matching the material used to cover Daniel's body. The evidence was enough for a warrant. The day the FBI arrived at her doorstep, Emily didn't fight. She didn't shout or cry. She opened the door, looked at the agents, and simply said, "I knew this day would come." Her voice was soft, almost relieved. Inside her home, investigators found traces of bleach on the basement floor and remnants of burned fabric in the fireplace. Every effort to erase the truth had only left more proof behind. As Emily sat in the back of the police car, her gaze fixed on the horizon, the sun dipped low behind the houses of Brooksville. The town watched in silence as the woman once admired for her grace and kindness was driven away. The perfect life she had built was gone. The secret she thought she had buried was now laid bare for the world to see. What began as a forbidden affair had ended in obsession, violence, and the unrelenting pursuit of justice. But the full truth of that night was still locked away inside Emily's mind. Something only she knew, and something she wasn't ready to share. Not yet. When the trial began, the courtroom was filled to capacity. Reporters lined the back wall, their cameras clicking every time Emily Dawson was let in wearing her prison-issued uniform, her once-styled hair now tied back in a loose knot. The town of Brooksville had turned out in full force, not to witness justice alone, but to make sense of how someone who once embodied grace and kindness could be sitting in the defendant's chair for murder. The prosecution opened with a simple but powerful statement. This case is not about love. It's about control, deceit, and the choices that end lives. From the moment the first witness spoke, the story unfolded like a slow-motion disaster that everyone had seen coming, but no one had dared to believe. The prosecutors presented a clear narrative. Emily had rekindled her relationship with Daniel Pierce, then tried to end it when the affair became inconvenient. But Daniel, desperate and unstable, refused to let her go. The evidence told the rest of the story: the deleted messages, the phone data, the plastic wrap, the boat rental, and the river where Daniel's body was found. To the jury, it painted a picture of a woman who had planned carefully, executed quietly, and cleaned up her tracks with chilling precision. But the defense fought back with equal force. They portrayed Emily as a victim of emotional blackmail, a woman pushed to the edge by a man who terrorized her, who showed up at her house uninvited and threatened to destroy her family. They argued that what happened that night was not murder. It was panic, fear, and self-defense. As the trial continued, the tension in the room grew unbearable. Experts testified about bruising patterns, text timestamps, and the logistics of the burial site. The prosecution called it premeditation. The defense called it survival. Emily sat silently through most of it, her expression empty, eyes fixed on the floor. But when the court played a recording of Daniel's final voicemail, a pleading, angry message sent just hours before his death, she finally broke down. Tears rolled down her cheeks as the jury listened to his voice echo through the room, a haunting reminder of the tangled emotions that had led to tragedy. The turning point came when a forensic analyst testified about the sequence of injuries on Daniel's body. The evidence revealed that he had been struck unconscious but not fatally injured. He had likely regained consciousness before being wrapped and dragged to the river. That small, devastating detail shifted the entire tone of the trial. It wasn't a clean, quick act of violence born out of panic. It was a series of choices, each one digging Emily deeper into guilt. When Emily finally took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. Her voice was soft, trembling but steady enough to be heard. She admitted that she had hit Daniel during an argument, believing he was dead when he fell. She confessed that fear had driven her to hide what happened, that she had acted out of desperation, not cruelty. But then she said something that froze everyone in place. She claimed Daniel had woken up when she tried to move him, begged her for help, and that she had pushed him into the river in a moment of terror. She said she watched him float away, still alive, unable to comprehend what she had done. The room was silent except for the scratch of pens and the sound of a woman quietly sobbing in the back row. The jury deliberated for nearly 2 days. When they returned, the verdict was read in a tone so calm it almost masked the weight of the words. Guilty of second-degree murder. Emily lowered her head as the sentence was announced. 25 years in prison. No outburst, no pleading, just a quiet acceptance of the fate she had created. Mark Dawson filed for divorce soon after, taking their children and moving out of Brooksville for good. Years later, people in town still spoke of Emily's story in hushed voices. Some said she had been punished too harshly. Others believed she got exactly what she deserved. Her old house remained unsold, its windows shuttered, its garden overgrown with weeds. Near the riverbank where Daniel's body was found, locals sometimes claimed to hear whispers at night, the sound of 2 voices caught in an argument that never ends. Emily served her time in silence. She rarely spoke to other inmates and never granted interviews. Those who saw her said she spent hours staring out of her cell window, watching the sky change colors as if waiting for something that would never come. Her story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly secrets can turn deadly, how love twisted by guilt and fear can destroy everything it touches. The perfect wife, the devoted mother, the woman next door, reduced to a headline that still sent shivers through Brooksville whenever it was mentioned. In the end, the affair that began as a spark of excitement ended as a storm of blood and betrayal. The truth came too late, the damage too deep. Emily Dawson's secret love affair didn't just end in murder. It ended in the quiet ruin of everyone it touched. A tragedy written not in passion, but in the unbearable weight of regret.